Hey, all right, it's time for the country.
Yeah, welcome to the Country Podcast, Politics for the People. I'm Justin Weller. There's a lot going on today in this news break. First, the Tampa Bay Rays. We're sporting their gear today because they start in the MLB playoffs that begin today. They're playing at 3. There's a bunch of other games to watch if you're so inclined. RFK Jr. is going to run as an independent. But we begin today with the insane clown property values. President Trump spent the day in court yesterday, he's there again today, to contest a civil fraud case. How does he continue to survive? That's right, the Insane Clown Show campaign came to New York yesterday, this time for the start of a civil proceeding organized by New York Attorney General Letitia James. She has sued the Trump Organization in civil court for fraudulent business practices in the amount of $250 million. I think that's the penalty, not necessarily the amount she's suing for, but that would be the potential penalty. Anyway, you may remember Ms. James as the Attorney General in New York that brought down Governor Cuomo and then ran to replace him, losing to the current governor, Kathy Hochul. General James is also known as a sworn Trump enemy, calling him a, quote, con man and, quote, carnival barker. It's not wrong. While campaigning with a pledge to shine a bright light into every dark corner of his real estate dealings, end quote. General James's investigation for this proceeding has been going on since 2019, but the indictment timing, it's actually not an indictment, my mistake. The bringing of the case lands the trial smack dab in the middle of the campaign for president. Mr. Trump indeed turned the proceeding yesterday, the first day of trial, into a full-fledged campaign stop. As background, General James filed this civil suit in September 2022 against Trump and 3 of his children, claiming, quote, that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself, cheat the system, end quote. Ms. James said in a statement at the time. Next, last week, the presiding judge in the case issued a summary judgment finding that the Trump Organization did inflate the value of its assets. The civil suit beginning yesterday will determine the implications of these valuations, who was responsible for them, and whether it rises to the level of conduct by which Trump will owe millions of dollars in penalties and be precluded from doing business in New York State. The ruling last week, however, was controversial. Judge Engeron's, I think I'm pronouncing that right, ruling valued the Mar-a-Lago property owned by Mr. Trump in West Palm Beach at $18 million. The bombastic Trumps, including his 2 sons, claim now in the press the property is worth $1.8 billion. What's that, like 1,000 times more? But real estate insiders in Palm Beach say they could sell it for at least $300 million without the nearby golf course. Sort of calls the judge's valuation, which of course he claims he got from the West Palm Beach real estate valuator. We could go into a long discussion of how the people of West Palm really don't want Trump there, but that's a story for another day. Either way, the judge rules it's worth $18 million. Trump says it's worth $1.8 million. There's real estate sources that say they would list it for at least $300 million. Okay? Here are some other comps. You know, what they say in the business is comps, comparison listed properties from the New York Post. And this is all quoted from them. To put it in perspective, a 2-acre wooded lot at 1980 South Ocean Boulevard, just 5 minutes from Mar-a-Lago, is currently listed for $150 million. Mar-a-Lago, situated at 1100 South Ocean Boulevard, dwarfs this lot tenfold and operates as a commercial business with around 500 members as part of the golf club. Also nearby, a 2.3-acre plot of land at 1063/1071 North Ocean Boulevard is on the market for a sky-high $200 million. Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate boasts a sprawling 20 acres, or almost 10 times the size of that $200 million listing, which would put it at, of course, $2 billion. That's a listing, not a sale, but still. And then finally, Forbes, the great Forbes, has appraised the property which is made up of 128 rooms at approximately $160 million in 2018, so 5 years ago, following extensive renovations and its exclusive Palm Beach location on what's called Billionaires Row. The property includes a 20,000 square foot ballroom, 5 clay tennis courts, and a sprawling waterfront pool. That's right, it's on both the ocean and the intercoastal. That's part of the discrepancy with the West Palm property people. You're not supposed to do that, apparently. All right, so that's the end of the quote. Sorry, the waterfront pool, and then the rest was me. All right, so Trump bought this property in 1985 for $10 million, when it was listed at the time for $20 million. An $18 million valuation almost 40 years later seems hard to justify. Nonetheless, General James' entire case relies on valuations like this. I haven't looked into the others, so you can do so. So it's likely President Trump will appeal the summary judgment that basically said his property is worth $18 million if he loses any elements of the business fraud civil case, meaning this thing's going to go on forever. True to Trump, though, he turned his visit to the courthouse into a grandiose barrage of complaints towards the judge, the New York Attorney General, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney General, and others. So here's a bit of what he had to say. Let's go to the videotape. Here's what he said walking out of the courtroom yesterday.
It's a disgraceful trial put forward by an Attorney General who's corrupt. We have murders going all over the city, all over the state at a record level. It's an epidemic, and they waste their time with this. With banks that were very happy, they got all their money back. They weren't defrauded. I've been defrauded. With the judge that ruled that a building, that a property is worth $18 million, $18 million, when in fact it's worth over $1 billion, probably $1.5 billion. It may be worth anything. But many properties which are sold are worth much more than were listed in the financial statement, like double and triple. What we have to do, and we're wasting our time on this trial with a Democrat judge from the clubhouses. It's a disgrace. They ought to look for the murderers and the killers that are all over New York killing people. And the violent crime that's being committed in our city and our state is disgraceful. And we're going to be here for months with a judge that already made up his mind. It's ridiculous. He's a Democrat judge, he's an operative, and it's ridiculous. Other than that, things went very well. What are you going to have for lunch?
It's ridiculous. You can tell he's kind of upset. I don't know. I'm not sure I've seen him as upset in front of the camera in a while. So one is not surprised to learn, though, that President Trump thinks everyone is out to get him. It reminds me of a quote from Catch-22 written by Joseph Heller. Quote, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you." End quote. It's clear to anyone paying attention that liberal prosecutors are out to get the former president. Liberal prosecutors are out to get the former president. But the contrapositive to the quote is also true. Just because everyone is out to get you doesn't mean you're not guilty. So anyway, to an impartial observer, it should look preposterous that a former president who left office with low approval and in some disgrace, and who is indicted in 4 concurrent jurisdictions, I think it's, 91 charges or something like that. That's the headline that a lot of folks, enemies of the president, former president, like to drum up. But yeah, it's a lot going on. Is leading the polls for his party nomination by an average of 42 points over 8 other viable candidates. Usually if you have 9 candidates, nobody's polling above 20, 30%. The leader's usually at 20 to 30%, it seems to me. He's at 52%, and even higher than that. He's 42 points above Ron DeSantis. It seems incredible to imagine, right? There are, however, a number of important factors at play. First and foremost, Trump is a former president. Usually when you have those 8 or 9 candidates, They're running either to replace an incumbent from the other party or in an open seat sort of thing where the president served 8 years. And despite his many shortcomings, though, he has all of the advantages of an incumbent in name recognition, political operations, fundraising, and certainly media coverage. You cannot watch a news program for very long without his name coming up. The irony is that the most left-leaning cable news networks get their best ratings when they spend time attacking Trump, putting him up there. And that's probably become counterproductive if their true aim is to get rid of him, because what happens is it delivers much more free coverage to Trump than he could possibly get otherwise. Second, the current president who replaced Mr. Trump is extremely unpopular. Indeed, President Biden set a new record for lowest approval rating of any president in the Gallup poll last year, around August. That was at the peak, of course, of inflation and some other things, gas prices, etc. But he continues to poll close to those same lows, with an average of 39.8% approve and 55.1% disapprove. I think that's from 538. Excuse me. So voters likely answer the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And think maybe the old guy wasn't so bad as the new guy, even though they got rid of him, right? Third, and most importantly, President Trump has struck a nerve, a generational nerve, in the American zeitgeist. As Andrew Yang said in his run-up for president in 2019, Trump is the symptom of much deeper problems in America. Here we're going to look at Mr. Yang in a Democratic debate during that last cycle. I think this was in 2019. Let's go ahead and the video.
The American people are the jury that will have the final verdict on this president and on the senators in the GOP who protected him.
Pete, fundamentally, you are missing the lesson of Donald Trump's victory. Donald Trump is not the cause of all of our problems, and we're making a mistake when we act like he is.
That's right.
He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for years and decades, and it is our job to get to the harder work of actually curing the disease. Most Americans feel like the political parties have been playing you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose for years, and you know who's been losing this entire time? We have. Our communities have. Our communities' way of life is disintegrating beneath our feet. That's why Iowa, a traditional swing state, went to Trump by almost 10 points. That's why Ohio, a traditional swing state, is now so red that I'm told we're not even going to campaign there. So these communities are seeing their way of life get blasted into smithereens. We've automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs and counting. We're closing 30% of New Hampshire stores and malls, and Amazon, the force behind that, is literally paying zero in taxes. These are the changes that Americans are seeing and feeling around us every day, and if we get to the hard work of curing those problems, we will not just defeat Donald Trump in the fall, but we'll actually be able to move our communities forward.
That's right. I can't agree with Mr. Yang more. I have chills down my spine from him saying that. This goes back to, I think, one of the first podcasts I ever did. Bread and circuses, man. They are showing you this circus of Hunter Biden and Donald Trump and court cases and, God, just a list and litany of other silly things that we are told to pay attention to every day while they rip the... I'm trying not to curse here. While they destroy our economy, our middle class, and all of the things that Mr. Yang just spoke about. Indeed, Mr. Trump won in 2016 in swing states that he had to win. In Ohio, in Iowa, in Wisconsin, and in Pennsylvania and Michigan. And these states used to be industrialized powerhouses, but were hollowed out by the globalist trade policies that sent a large swath of manufacturing jobs to China and other third world countries, and the internet revolution that automated out many more of their jobs. The best advice many seem to have for these people that are left behind is learn to code, which became an intense internet meeting. President Trump speaks to the working poor and middle class who feel they lose more and more every day. as the elite and the wealthy and the powerful continue to prosper. These working class folks watch as the rich men north of Richmond make sweetheart deals between big corporations and big governments to squeeze out their wages, their jobs, their small businesses, and more recently, their freedoms. Even the legal system looks like it has left them behind. They think there's a two-tier justice system in which the rich are exonerated and the poor go to jail. So even as Mr. Trump is indicted and prosecuted, they see his struggle as their struggle. They perceive the same forces squeezing them out, squeezing him out. And Trump is their champion, fighting against a rigged system for survival. If he beats the rap, maybe they can too. And look, you may think these ideas are misguided. You may think I'm crazy, what I just said. But there's certainly at least two sides to every argument. Have you considered the other? And I would say, too, if you do think that what most people on the left and many on the right, although Andrew Yang gets it, still almost 8 years later, it's been 8 years since Trump started campaigning for president. All of those folks have not come to grips with this. Perception is reality. If you do not address the issues and the concerns of the working class in America openly and honestly and work to improve the lives of this large swath of Americans, the folks that built America for reals, the symptoms of this disease will continue to fester. You'll get more Trump and people like him. If a candidate emerges who understands this and can effectively decode these problems while offering positive steps to solve them, I'm talking about a positive message most can agree to and support. And you need that same person to have the ability to implement changes, fundamental, real change for these folks that I'm talking about. If you're not able to do that, you're not going to win the presidency. And if you don't, if someone like that does not emerge, and quickly too, we'll be stuck with 4 more years of President Trump or President Biden. God help us all. Hey, all right, it's the country. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Justin Weller. You know, here we rely on premium subscribers to produce this show and all of our content. If you like what we're doing, would you consider heading over to www.thecountry.news, where you can become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month. Please also subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this show, and follow us on the X, where you'll find us under the handle @JWTheCountry. Thanks so much. Now on to the show. Next is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president. And the Democrats, in my opinion, have so thoroughly demolished democracy in their presidential primary that RFK Jr. looks poised to go independent, maybe even have a shot of winning. So my father died suddenly when I was 19. It was an amazing shock to the whole family and a devastating turn of events in the life of a. I still think of my dad almost every day and wonder how my life would have been different had he lived. And this is perhaps in some small way why I feel a level of simpatico for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who tragically lost his uncle when he was 9 and his father when he was 14, both to assassinations. Indeed, he struggled with alcohol and drug addiction as a young man, but nonetheless graduated Harvard, studied at the London School of Economics, and earned a JD at the University of Virginia. His struggles with addictions continued well into the 1980s, got clean, started working in environmental law. He has been credited with many positive wins, including saving of the Hudson watershed in New York. You should look into that story. It's fascinating. You can swim and eat out of the Hudson River today, what you couldn't 40 years ago. That's thanks to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and a number of other folks. He was the leader of that movement, the lawsuit. Today, he stands as a polarizing figure in the Democratic Party. He has, of course, declared his candidacy for president, but you would be hard-pressed to know it in Democratic circles, other than disingenuous and misleading attacks meant to freeze him out of the race. He is the candidate not to be mentioned. In fact, one of the largest attacks on RFK is that he's an anti-vaxxer. It's simply not true, and I invite you to go to the source. Go to an interview, a long-form interview, a podcast or a town hall, something like that, where he talks about his view on vaccines. And then tell me he's some sort of kook. In fact, I want to find a video for you here, and we're going to play it from, if I can find it, a recent town hall. All right, so this is the town hall I was thinking of. It's actually on News Nation. I apologize, not CNN. This is rather lengthy, but I think it's really important for those of you skeptical of RFK to watch and or listen to this. Please do.
And Mr. Kennedy, one of the biggest controversies surrounding your candidacy is your stance on childhood vaccines. Nearly every scientific and medical organization, including the CDC, the FDA, the AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all say you're wrong on this issue. This leads us to our very first question from our audience. It's Dr. Tariq Butt, who specializes...
I would ask you one thing. On what issue?
On childhood vaccines.
What about them?
And whether they ever cause autism or damage kids. They all say these vaccines have saved millions of lives.
They never damage kids.
I don't think anybody has said they never have. There might be a child here, but overall, all those organizations say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives. But let's get to our audience question from Dr. Butts.
Good evening. Eradication of chickenpox and polio from the U.S. and many parts of the world is a direct result of regular vaccines. Measles, mumps, rubella, and many diseases are preventable, and there's little to no evidence of these diseases in vaccinated population. Your vaccine stance is dangerous to the health and well-being of millions. Medical experts are deeply concerned about your message. How can we help you to come to the side of science?
What was the question? How can you help me come to my senses?
No.
No.
Side of science?
You are a very smart person.
Okay, so, I think most people don't know what my stance is on vaccines. I've never been anti-vaccine. And I've said that hundreds and hundreds of times, but it doesn't matter. Because that is a way of silencing me. Using that pejorative to describe me is a way of silencing or marginalizing me. My position...
Just real quick. No, it is an extremely effective way of marginalizing and silencing opposing views. It's actually a tactic employed by totalitarian states to silence opposition. I want to make that clear. Anytime you see a label placed on somebody like that, anti-vax, anti-science, anti-something, whatever, they are pulling on your emotions and trying to get you to label that person and stop thinking of that person as an actual human that has actual thoughts and just marginalize them as this object to be hated. So, sorry to interrupt you. RFK, say on.
Vaccines, I think virtually every American would agree with my stance on vaccines, which is that vaccines should be tested like other medicines. They should be safety tested. And unfortunately, the vaccines are not safety tested. They're not, of the 72 vaccine doses now mandated, essentially mandated, they're recommended, but they're really mandated, for American children. None of them, not one, has ever been subject to a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial.
Yes, they have.
No.
Yes, they have.
Okay, let me just say something. Dr. Fauci and many other people for many years said this, that Bobby Kennedy, when he says that, is wrong. So I met with Dr. Fauci in 2016, and I agreed to go on Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission, and I was with Aaron Siri and Lynn Redwood and a number of other people, and we said to him, can you show us one test from any vaccine, pre-licensing safety test? And he said, I'll send it to you. I can't find one now. He never did. So we sued him. We sued Aaron Siri and I sued HHS. And after a year of litigation and stonewalling, they said that they could not provide a single safety study for any vaccine that is on the childhood schedule, pre-licensing safety study. So anybody who wants to read that can go to to the Children's Health Defense website, and you can read HHS's admission that not a single one has ever been safety tested pre-licensing. Now, what I've said is other medicines are required to do that. And we should have to do that for vaccines. If I'm wrong, show me the test, show me the study. You won't be able to, because there are none. That means that we don't know what the long-term risks are, the risk profile of those products. And I'll give you mentioned chickenpox. So when CDC was thinking of recommending this chickenpox vaccine as mandating for children, they did a study, and the scientist they hired to do that study was a scientist called Gary Goldman, a contract scientist. And he did the study in an isolated place in California called Antelope Valley, a long-term study. And what they find is if you give the chickenpox vaccine, mass vaccinate with chickenpox, it stops chickenpox, but it causes shingles epidemics later on, which are 20 times as deadly as chickenpox. So nevertheless, despite those studies, we mandated for American children in this country. In Europe, they don't. If you go to the British National Health Service website right now, you can read on that where they say, we do not recommend chickenpox vaccines because it causes shingles epidemics later on. And that's the problem. You can't just look at, you can say that this product is going to prevent this particular disease, but you have to look at the long-term impacts. Vaccines, like other medicines, have injuries that have long diagnostic horizons and long incubation periods, that if you do not do long-term studies on placebo-controlled studies comparing vaccinated populations to unvaccinated populations, you won't do it. Let me just give you one quick other example. The most popular vaccine in the world is the DTP vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. We banned it, we got rid of it in this country because it was causing injuries, brain injuries, severe brain injuries or death to 1 in every 300 children. We used it in the 80s, and that's why there was all this litigation against vaccine companies that precipitated the passage of the Vaccine Act that then gave them immunity from liability. But in Europe, they don't use it. In America, they don't use it. But we give it to 161 million African children a year. So Bill Gates asked the Danish government to support that program and said it saved 30 million lives. The Danish government said, show us the data. He wasn't able to. So they went to Africa and did their own studies. And they looked at 30 years of DTP data. And what they found shocked them all. They found that girls who got the DTP were dying at 10 times the rate of unvaccinated girls, but they were dying of things that nobody had ever associated with the vaccine. They were dying of diphtheria, of anemia, malaria, bilharzia, pulmonary disease, respiratory disease, and pneumonia. And nobody noticed for 30 years that it was the vaccinated girls and not the unvaccinated girls that were dying. And what had happened is these girls were not dying of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. The vaccine had protected them against those, but it had also ruined their immune systems. And they were unable to defend themselves against other just minor diseases that other kids who had hardy immune systems were able to fend off. So that's why you need these long-term studies, and that's why I'm worried that we don't do that here in the United States.
And we do have evidence of that, like there are clinical trials, randomized trial, and there's a difference between association and causation, right? Somebody can take a medication and get involved in a motor vehicle accident. It doesn't mean that, that is associated, but it was not caused by medication unless we get to the bottom of it. So many times we should continue to figure out ways to, for the safety of vaccines, of course, and medical community is always looking for that. But at the same time, we can really come to agreement that vaccines are important. They do prevent those diseases. After all, smallpox was in the world, all around the world. It's not there anymore. Yeah. So there is evidence of that.
Then there's diseases, when we passed the Vaccine Act, when I was a kid, there was only 3 vaccines, and I was compliant. But when we passed the Vaccine Act, it made vaccines very, very valuable. And all of a sudden, there was a gold rush to add a lot of new vaccines to the schedule for diseases that aren't even casually contagious, like rotavirus, like hepatitis B. Why are we giving hepatitis B vaccine to a one-day-old child? Hepatitis B, the major vectors for that are it's sexually transmitted or by needles. Why would you give that to a one-day-old child? It's really a profit motive. Now, you're right that correlation is not causation, but the Institute of Medicine has looked at the vaccine schedule and said in their 2011 report, there are over 150 injuries that are likely to be associated with vaccines that have never been studied. So it's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused. And that's wrong. We need an agency that is putting public health first and not pharmaceutical profits. You were talking about the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis, started with the oxycodone. Now it's, fentanyl. But the same companies that got the FDA to lie to us about the addictiveness, lie to every doctor in this country about the addictiveness of oxycodone and get a whole generation addicted. Those are the same companies that make these, other products. And the 4 companies that make vaccines in this country, Merck, Sanofi, Glaxo, and Pfizer, have paid over $35 billion in criminal penalties over the past decade for lying to doctors, for falsifying science, for defrauding regulators. And we need to keep an eye on them. We can't just trust them. If they say it's a vaccine, we all trust it. We need to have actual science on it. And I think that's all I say. I don't want to get rid of vaccines. If you want to take a vaccine, you should be able to do it. We need good science, and that's all I've asked for.
But so, what do you say to people? It sounds like you're saying that every scientist, every government, our government, governments around the world, doctors like Dr. Butts are all lying about vaccines.
I've never said anything like that.
The AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the FDA says, and in fact, on its website, you can clearly see vaccines they go through 3 stages of FDA testing against double-blind placebos. They already do that.
The FDA also said that OxyContin is not addictive, by the way.
Elizabeth, you can say that. I'm telling you.
I'm not saying that. The FDA
no, the FDA is not saying that.
Yes,
because
they do on their website.
They will not tell you that that there's any vaccine that has ever undergone a long-term placebo-controlled trial prior to licensure. They will not, because it's not true. And you can go to my website and see where HHS says, there are none.
Well, we have competing websites saying different things.
Let me say this. I'm not saying the AMA is lying or the doctors are lying. What I'm saying is the FDA does lie. And the FDA lied to us about Vioxx. They knew that the Vioxx was causing heart attacks, but they let doctors believe that it was a medicine that was good, beneficial for headaches and arthritis without telling it that they were going to kill them. And they ended up killing between 120,000 and 500,000.
All these doctors and all these scientists around the world who say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives.
Appeal to authority, no engagement of the facts. Why didn't you address that Vioxx killed 150,000 people while the FDA was lying to them about its negative consequences? He's destroying them.
The same people said Vioxx was safe. The same people said opioids,
that's right,
that oxycodone was not addictive because FDA said it and they believe them. And that's the problem. We have a corrupt federal agency that's lying to the AMA, to all of those agencies and all of the doctors, and they believe them. But those agencies are controlled by pharma. That is the problem, and that's what I'm trying to end as president.
You know that your own family doesn't support, many members of your own family don't support your position on vaccines. Your brother, your sister, and your niece have all written an editorial saying on vaccines, Bobby is wrong. His work on vaccines is having heartbreaking consequences. What's your response? Your own family thinks you're wrong on
Does
this.
your family agree with everything that you say?
Definitely not. You got me on that one.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah, he wiped them up there. I'm gonna look and see if I can find some of the things he's talking about. Hang on one. Okay, I couldn't find it on Mr. Sorry, we gotta fix this. There we go. On RFK, the site where RFK said it was. But look at what I found here. ICANN versus HHS. And sorry, my monitor's over here, so I gotta read it over there. Key legal win recast vaccine debate. Los Angeles, September 14th, 2018. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has admitted that, in direct violation of federal law, it failed to provide a single vaccine safety report to Congress for 30 years, according to Informed Consent Action Network. This acknowledgement comes after 8 months of stonewalling from HHS following a Freedom of Information Act request from the nonprofit ICANN and its founder, Del Bigtree. ICANN sought copies of the reports HHS was required to submit to Congress every 2 years starting in 1988, detailing improvements it made to vaccine safety. ICANN was represented by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They sued, and basically they won. Quote, the 1986 National Childhood Vaccination Injury Act granted economic immunity to pharmaceutical companies for vaccine injuries and hence eviscerated their economic incentive for them to take responsibility for vaccine safety, says Bigtree. Market forces driving vaccine safety were simply eliminated. It is apparent, going on to quote him a little bit further on, it is apparent that HHS doesn't have a clue as to the actual safety profile of the now 39 doses and growing of vaccines given by 1 year of age, including in utero, said Bigtree. In 1986, a 1-year-old child received 11 doses. So you can see what we're talking about here. He was absolutely right about that particular quote. So let's go find the chickenpox. Hang on. All right, and here you go. We found the NHS website, the National Health Service over in the United Kingdom. Chickenpox vaccine overview. The chickenpox vaccine protects against the varicella zoster virus that causes chickenpox. The chickenpox vaccine is not part of the routine childhood vaccination schedule. It's currently only offered on the NHS to people who are in close contact with someone who's particularly vulnerable to chickenpox or its complications. There are 2 chickenpox vaccines currently available. The brand names of the chickenpox vaccine are Verivax and Verorix. Who should have the chickenpox vaccine? The vaccine is recommended for people who are not immune to chickenpox and are in close contact with people at risk of becoming seriously ill if they catch it. Right? So it's a risk profile. It's exactly what you should do if you were a sensible person regarding vaccines. But you get his point, right? First, did anybody listen to what he had to say and think he's some kook that doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to vaccines? Did he sound like an anti-vaxxer? Some sort of crazy person that you should never listen to or think about? Look, I'm not saying he's right about everything. He's human. I'm sure he's wrong about stuff. But think about the way you've heard him portrayed and what you heard there. And then we just showed you 2 examples that he gave. And I'm sure I could look up the DPT one too, and we'd be fine. But 2 examples that he gave where very bad things are happening in the vaccine industry in America. They're not testing the vaccines, according to the HHS in its letter to him. And they're giving you vaccines that you don't need, like hepatitis B for a 1-year-old, or chickenpox virus that has worse effects down the road. 30 years down the road, there's a shingles outbreak. But heck, that makes the vaccine companies money too, doesn't it? And then we're actually in this place where there's no legal need for them to produce a safe vaccine because they're immune from lawsuit. And that's also true of the COVID vaccines, just so you know. All right, so I felt like we needed to take that aside. But as we were talking about, so RFK, other than being called an anti-vaxxer and all these other conspiracy theories, which hopefully we just showed you may not be true, he is not mentioned in the mainstream media by Democrats, etc. But it's much worse than that. Despite consistent polling that shows Democrats overwhelmingly prefer any candidate other than Biden in 2024, I think the last one I saw was 67% of Democrats. The Democratic National Committee has declared there will be no debates between their three declared candidates. That's right. There's another one, Marianne Williamson. You may remember she ran, I forget if she ran in 2020 or 2016, maybe both, but she's run before. And she's the third who's being locked out of this contest. This despite polling that shows RFK Jr. has more support than Ron DeSantis, who's currently polling in second for the Republicans. RFK Jr. averages 14.9% on the Real Clear Politics average. You can go to realclearpolitics.com. That's usually where I go. Sometimes I go to 538. But he's also recently polled at 16%. And there was another poll at 25% for RFK Jr. While Ron DeSantis is at 13.6%. So RFK is polling better than Ron DeSantis. He's polling better than anybody not named Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And yet he's not allowed to debate. Even the dreamy James Vanderbeek, you may remember from, I think it was in Friday Night Lights, but I stumbled upon this TikTok of his. He's upset about this lack of debate, stating in a TikTok, quote, "I cannot get over the fact that the Democratic National Committee is saying there will not be a debate to decide the nominee for president. Are you fucking kidding me? There's no debate? There's no debate over an 80-year-old man who, if he lives, will be the oldest sitting president in the history of the country? And if he doesn't live, has a vice president whose approval rating is worse than his? Again, lowest ever?" That was me. He started with worse than his. Or he ended with that. That was an end quote. And I said, as we read before, worst polling ever from last year. Of course, the counter argument would be that Biden is the incumbent and so should automatically receive the nomination. But I wonder, does the party that continues to tout itself as fighting for democracy, that's another one of those phrases that when you hear it, you should just duck because some BS is coming your way and it's no good for you. Fighting for democracy, really wish to disallow a fair democratic process to choose their candidate for president, especially when a large majority of their members have made it clear they want someone else besides the president? And do you think the decision that Democrats have made to disallow completely a race for their nomination, do you think that serves the people or someone else? Maybe the party insiders? When you get a poll that's 2/3, I mean, the American people don't go 2/3 for anything. It really makes you wonder why they refuse to listen to those people. Do you feel like that's democratic? Further, you might be surprised to learn that even in a non-incumbent year, the Democratic Party nomination process for president is highly undemocratic. The Democrats, unlike Republicans who have absolutely no such thing, employ the use of what they call superdelegates for their convention voting. Superdelegates are party insiders, usually existing Democrat politicians, right? So Bill Clinton would be a superdelegate. Hillary Clinton would be a superdelegate. Nancy Pelosi's a superdelegate. If you live in a blue state with a Democrat governor, that person's probably a superdelegate. There's hundreds of them. They get to vote at the convention, just like they had been elected to do so as a delegate. Like when you go to a primary and you vote, you're actually not voting for your candidate. You're voting for a delegate who represents that candidate and then pledges to vote for them at the convention. The convention vote is where they select the nominee, right? So what we're saying is there's hundreds of Democrats who get to count themselves with their one vote as if they're 150,000 Democrats. You understand me? The superdelegate numbers change from year to year, but are significant enough that some wonder whether Bernie Sanders would have won both 2016 and 2020 Democratic Party nominations without these elitist oligarchs thumbing the scale, or in those cases, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, respectively. I want to show you what I'm talking about, and I'm going to pull up an example here. Just give me a second. All right, so I wanted to show you this. So this is from HuffPost, right? Not a conservative site, liberal site. How Democratic superdelegates decided the 2016 election. In effect this year, more than any before, superdelegates may have not only decided the Democratic nominee, but they likely also chose the next president of the United States, which is funny because they're saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win. But anyway, as I scroll down, they've got this little results thing here, and shoot, it does not look like you can see this. Let me just pause 1 sec here and see if I can make this bigger. All right, just so you know, I just zoomed in here, and actually you need to be able to see this better, my friends. So let's get that over there. And yeah, so this is still HuffPost. This is there, how this happened. But let's go down here. So check this out. This is the results from the New Hampshire Democratic primary vote on February 9, 2016. And you can see there were 3 candidates that were available: Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and Martin O'Malley. All right. Bernie got 152,000 votes. Hillary got 95,000 votes. Bernie's total is 61%. Hillary's about 38%. And this is those delegates I'm talking about. So pledged delegates would mean because so many people voted for Bernie, he got 15 pledged delegates from that vote, which means those 15 people go to the convention. They have to vote for Bernie. Okay. Hillary Clinton, 9 pledged votes. 95,000 people voted for Hillary. She got 9 delegates. Those people are pledged to her. They have to go to the convention and vote for Hillary. Oh, look at this other column. Unpledged. That's your super delegates. Those are people that can vote however they want to. They're the party insiders, the fat cats, sticking their thumb on the scale for their preferred candidate. And you can see here, Bernie got none of them and Hillary got 6, which in effect makes the New Hampshire primary a tie, 15-15. Bernie Sanders got 61% of the vote. Hillary Clinton got 38% of the vote. And the Democrats call that a tie. That is how undemocratic the primary process in the Democratic Party, the people fighting for you for democracy, works. So that's how undemocratic this selection process can be in the Democratic Party. It's even going to be worse this year, right? So not only do we have RFK can't debate, nor can Marianne Williamson. Not only do we have these super delegates that in these tight contests typically allow, sorry, I'm banging on the microphone now, typically allow the super delegates to sort of, the vote is usually close enough where the super delegates can decide who wins. But it's going to get even worse because this year, the Democrats, in their attempt to get Joe Biden through any primary challenge, have changed the schedule. It's always been Iowa caucus, then New Hampshire primary. They might have messed with that the last cycle around. I can't remember. But the issue is Joe Biden didn't do well in either of those places. He does great in South Carolina. You know what the Democrats have done? Not only did they change the schedule so that South Carolina is the first, but because of the contentious nature of that, they've decided that if anybody steps foot into Iowa and New Hampshire and campaigns for those primaries in that caucus, which is planned to go ahead and happen anyway, RFK claims, those votes that he gets in Iowa or New Hampshire will not count. And they will go to President Biden instead. He told Forbes recently, quote, "They've made rules that if any candidate sets foot in the state of Iowa or sets foot in the state of New Hampshire, that none of the votes that are cast for that candidate will be tallied. In other words, any delegate that I win in New Hampshire or Iowa would go instead to the president," RFK Jr. said during the interview. "If you add up all the super delegates that they control and all of the automatic delegates that just go to the party, I would have to win," meaning RFK would have to win, "almost 80% of all the states," end quote. So it's rigged. And, again, like you can argue he's the incumbent, whatever, but we've already spoken about that. It's a rigged primary. Okay? And so the scuttlebutt now is that I wrote this yesterday, and I think today it's pretty much a fait accompli that RFK Jr., because of the anti-democratic primary process, will likely switch to an independent run. I think that bodes very poorly for both Joe Biden and Donald Trump's campaigns. I saw, and it was all over the news, James Carville, the old, Louisianan guy. I met him once. He's quite a character. We played craps in Las Vegas together for a little bit. He said in Bill Maher's podcast, in a race between Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Cornel West, and RFK Jr., Donald Trump is the clear betting favorite. And then his quote goes, "Somebody better wake the fuck up." I mean, it's obviously wonderful handicap being he's an old pro and he knows better than me. I would sort of take issue with a little bit of it in the sense that I, myself, am a right-leaning libertarian that normally votes with the Republicans. But if the parties nominate Trump and Biden again, I'll vote RFK Jr. twice on Sunday. Enough is enough. So as I mentioned at the top, I am a huge baseball fan. It was the first sport that I think I really took to. I remember going to Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. Probably the first time I went was when I was about 5 years old, so somewhere 1979, 1980. We loved it there. I was a huge Orioles fan growing up. Of course, I've lived in Florida for a very long time, and just like my dad, who grew up a Reds fan and then moved to Maryland, when I moved to Florida and my son was born, I decided to become a Rays fan. So I've been a Rays fan ever since, probably about 20 years, a little more. But to commemorate the beginning of the baseball playoffs, I would like to read to you now a wonderful poem by Ernest Lawrence Thayer called Casey at the Bat. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. Score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. Then, when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. Straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought if only Casey could but get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did Jimmy Blake. And the former was a Lulu, and the latter was a cake. So upon that stricken multitude, grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance Casey's getting to the bat. Flynn, he let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and men saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second, Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more, they rose a lusty yell. It rambled through the valley, it rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into the place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile upon Casey's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger to the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. "That ain't my style," said Casey. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" shouted someone in the stands, and likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's vision shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two!" "Fraud!" cried the maddened crowd, and answered fraud. But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience applauded. They saw his face grow stern and cold, they saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip, his teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. Somewhere men are laughing, somewhere children shout. There is no joy in Mudville. Casey has struck out. Well, that's our show for today. We sure do appreciate you tuning into The Country. It's politics for the people. Check us out at thecountry.news. See ya.
Listen, can you hear him saying?